What started as a routine promotional interview quickly turned into one of late-night television's most explosive confrontations when Denzel Washington walked off the Late Show with Stephen Colbert after the host ambushed him with pointed questions about faith and politics. The Ed Sullivan Theater buzzed with its usual pre-show excitement as fans filled their seats, expecting nothing more than a charming, lighthearted chat. Washington had come to promote his latest directorial project, a powerful drama exploring themes of redemption and second chances, already drawing critical acclaim and generating Oscar buzz. But behind the scenes, trouble was already brewing. Insiders revealed that Colbert's writing team had been preparing gotcha questions meant to corner Washington on his outspoken Christian faith and traditional views, while Colbert himself allegedly told producers he wanted to challenge the actor's carefully crafted narrative. On stage, however, the evening began innocently. Colbert's monologue landed as expected, his political jokes drawing laughs and applause. When he finally introduced Washington, the actor walked out with his trademark warmth and dignity, greeting Colbert with a smile and handshake before taking his seat. The opening minutes were smooth, light banter about the new film, playful teasing about Washington's legendary work ethic, and the kind of natural rapport late-night audiences had grown accustomed to. Then Colbert shifted gears. Leaning back with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, he asked how Washington's personal faith had influenced his approach to the themes of forgiveness and redemption in his film. Washington responded thoughtfully, explaining that faith, regardless of form, provides a framework for understanding forgiveness, and that his character's journey was about confronting mistakes and striving to reclaim his true self. The audience responded warmly, but Colbert pressed harder. The host suggested there was irony in Hollywood actors speaking about moral values while working in an industry built on fantasy. Washington, caught off guard, chose his words carefully. He explained that he wasn't lecturing anyone, but simply being authentic about who he was and that people were free to take or leave what he shared. Colbert leaned in, sensing an opportunity. He accused Washington of staying silent on divisive issues such as marriage equality, abortion rights, and religion in politics, framing it as having it both ways, benefiting from the moral authority of faith without facing the scrutiny of controversial positions. The studio grew noticeably tense, the audience unsure how to react. Washington's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. He explained that his faith taught him to love, not judge, and that his values were rooted in dignity, family, and hard work, not politics. He reminded Colbert that he was an actor and director, not a candidate for office. But Colbert pushed further. He challenged Washington about his church, suggesting that silence on these hot-button issues was itself a political stance. The cameras caught the shift in Washington's demeanor. The easy smile was gone, replaced by a firm, guarded expression. Fixing his gaze on the host, Washington asked sharply, "Are you interviewing me about my film, or are you trying to get me to take political position so you can have a viral moment?" The audience gave a nervous laugh, sensing the tension but unsure whether to side with the host or the guest. Colbert, seemingly energized by the friction, insisted he was only seeking an honest conversation with someone of Washington's influence. Washington, however, wasn't convinced. His posture stiffened, his tone cooled, and in that moment the entire dynamic of the interview unraveled, setting the stage for one of the most shocking walk-offs in late-night history. The confrontation between Denzel Washington and Stephen Colbert escalated into one of the most shocking moments ever captured on late-night television. What began as a tense exchange quickly unraveled into a full-blown showdown. Colbert, trying to frame the discussion around accountability, leaned forward and told Washington that when he talked about faith and values in interviews and made films about redemption, audiences deserved to know where he stood on the issues that mattered. Washington's jaw set as his hands gripped the arms of his chair. Calmly but firmly, he asked, "The issues that matter to who? To you? To your audience? Or to the millions of people who just want to see a good movie and leave feeling like the world isn't completely broken?" Colbert shot back that democracy was under attack, women's rights were being rolled back, and LGBTQ+ Americans were facing renewed discrimination. He accused Washington of silence while claiming moral authority through faith, insisting that it raised troubling questions. The studio's energy shifted to near panic. Washington's publicist had moved to the edge of the stage, phone in hand, ready to intervene. while producers exchanged frantic looks in the control booth. Washington's voice, rising for the first time, cut through the tension. "I never claimed moral authority over anyone. I share my experiences, what's gotten me through hard times. I try to make films that mean something. But you're sitting here trying to shove me into political boxes so you can score points and get a viral clip." Colbert's carefully composed mask cracked, his tone turning sharp as he declared he was holding Washington accountable. Washington's voice hardened, declaring that a relationship with God and one's moral compass didn't need to fit into late-night television's political categories. The audience responded with scattered, uneasy applause, some clapping loudly, others sitting in stunned silence. Colbert, visibly flushed, pressed again. "So, you're saying neutrality on civil rights is respect?" That was the breaking point. Washington rose abruptly, his composure fracturing. "I'm saying ambushing a guest who came here in good faith to talk about his work, forcing him into political stances he never agreed to discuss, then lecturing him about morality, that isn't respect." The audience gasped audibly. This was no longer an interview. It had become an all-out confrontation. Colbert, cornered but unwilling to retreat, doubled down, ordering Washington to sit back down and accusing him of deflection. Washington stood tall, towering over the desk, his presence dominating the stage. "The substance," he said coldly, "is that you invited me here under false pretenses. Your team said this was about the film. Instead, you're trying to turn me into your political punching bag." Colbert's voice took on a condescending edge. "Oh, come on. You're a public figure worth hundreds of millions. You can handle a few tough questions unless your faith only works when people are being nice to you." The line struck deep. Washington's eyes flashed with controlled fury. "My faith?" he said, voice steady but laced with steel. "My faith taught me to turn the other cheek, but it also taught me not to cast pearls before swine." The insult landed like a thunderclap. Colbert's face went white, his jaw dropping as the audience erupted in gasps, applause, and nervous laughter. "Did you just call me a swine on my own show?" Colbert asked, his voice trembling slightly as he gripped his cue cards. Washington didn't flinch. "I called it like I see it. You're sitting there safe behind your desk, tearing down a man's character for entertainment. What would you call that?" Chaos gripped the control room, with the producer desperately signaling to cut to commercial. Colbert waved them off, his pride wounded, his anger blinding his judgment. "I'll call it journalism," he snapped. "I'll call it holding powerful people accountable. You walk around Hollywood as a moral authority, making movies about redemption while staying silent on the issues that affect people's lives. That's not faith, it's cowardice disguised as wisdom." The word cowardice lingered in the air like poison. Washington stepped closer to the desk, his presence overwhelming. "Cowardice?" he repeated, his voice booming now. "Cowardice is hiding behind comedy to attack people. Cowardice is ambushing guests who can't fight back on equal terms. Cowardice is exactly what you're doing right now." The audience shifted uncomfortably, some standing as though ready to leave, the suffocating tension breaking the usual flow of television. Colbert rose behind his desk, trying to meet Washington's intensity but falling short. "I'm not hiding," he said defensively. "I'm asking direct questions about your beliefs and your responsibilities as a public figure. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't do interviews." Washington leaned forward, his voice now dangerously quiet. "Maybe I shouldn't," he said. "Maybe I should stick to professionals who understand the difference between an interview and an interrogation." The audience was split between hushed silence and scattered applause. In that moment, Washington turned his back on Colbert, nodded briefly to the crowd, and strode off stage. Colbert stood frozen behind his desk, visibly shaken as the control room finally cut to an emergency commercial break. The studio buzzed in shock. Audience members whispered in disbelief, some applauding Washington's defiance, others stunned by the unprecedented collapse of the interview. Within minutes, clips of the walk-off began circulating online, igniting a firestorm of debate across social media. Some hailed Washington for standing firm in the face of what they saw as an ambush, while others accused him of dodging accountability. What was meant to be a simple promotional appearance had instead become a cultural flashpoint, one that left both Washington's dignity and Colbert's credibility under intense public scrutiny. The host's composure was cracking completely now, his voice rising to a near shout. "Professional? You think ducking every important question while claiming moral superiority is professional? You think using your faith as a shield while refusing to take any real stands is professional? Washington's response was like ice. I think treating a guest with basic human decency is professional. I think honoring the agreement your staff made about what this interview would cover is professional. What you're doing isn't journalism, Stephen. It's a hit job with better lighting. The accusation of bad faith struck a nerve. Colbert's mask was completely off now, revealing something ugly underneath. A hit job? You came on my show. Nobody forced you to be here. If you can't handle real questions about real issues, then maybe you should stick to puff pieces on Entertainment Tonight. The contempt in his voice was palpable. Washington stepped back, not in retreat, but in disgust. Real questions. Is that what you call this? You've spent 15 minutes trying to trap me into political statements that have nothing to do with why I'm here. You've questioned my faith, my integrity, and my character, all while hiding behind the pretense of being some kind of crusading journalist. Colbert was spiraling now, his voice cracking with anger and humiliation. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm trying to get honest answers from someone who's made a career out of playing both sides. You want the respect that comes with being a moral voice, but you don't want to take the heat that comes with actually having positions. The studio had gone completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras and the heavy breathing of two men locked in verbal combat. Washington looked around at the audience, many of whom were staring in shock, then back at Colbert with something approaching pity. You know what, Stephen? You're right about one thing. I do want respect, but the difference between us is that I try to earn it through my work, through how I treat people, through the example I set. You seem to think you can demand it while tearing others down. Colbert's voice was shaking now, his professionalism completely abandoned. Don't you dare lecture me about respect. You've been condescending to me since you walked out here, acting like you're above it all, like you're too good for real questions. Washington shook his head slowly. The only thing I'm too good for is this ambush, this performance, this attempt to use me for your political theater. I came here to talk about a film that means something to me. Instead, you've turned it into whatever this is. The host was no longer thinking clearly, his responses becoming more erratic and desperate. This is accountability, he snapped. This is what happens when you try to have it both ways. You can't claim to be a moral leader while staying silent on every issue that matters. Moral leader, Washington repeated, his voice carrying a mixture of incredulity and exhaustion. I never claimed to be anybody's leader. I'm an actor and a director who happens to have faith. But you've decided that's not enough. You've decided I need to be your perfect political puppet or your villain. Well, I'm neither. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, both men's voices echoing through the stunned studio. Colbert, realizing he was losing control of his own show, made one final desperate attempt to regain the upper hand. Fine, he snapped. Walk away. Prove my point. Show everyone what happens when someone with real questions corners you. Run back to your safe spaces and your softball interviews. Colbert sneered, his words landing like a slap. Washington paused with his hand on the back of his chair, his expression hardening. For a moment, it looked as if he might strike back with equal venom. Instead, he straightened his jacket, turned toward the camera, and spoke with calm authority. You know what? You're absolutely right, Stephen. I am going to walk away. Not because I can't handle tough questions, but because I respect myself too much to participate in this circus any longer. His voice was steady, measured, and somehow more devastating than any shout could have been. The camera operator, uncertain of protocol, kept rolling as Washington addressed the viewers at home. To anyone watching tonight who came here expecting to hear about a film that explores themes of forgiveness and redemption, I apologize that you had to witness this instead. The movie opens this Friday, and I hope you'll judge it on its own merits. Colbert, realizing he was being completely upstaged, tried to regain control. Oh, so now you're going to use my show to promote your movie after calling me a swine? Washington turned back to him with a look that could freeze fire. I'm going to do what professionals do, Stephen. I'm going to honor my commitment to the people who worked on this film. Even if you couldn't honor your commitment to conduct a respectful interview. The host was unraveling, his voice cracking with frustration and embarrassment. Respectful? You've been condescending and self-righteous from the moment you sat down, acting like you're too pure for politics while the rest of us have to live in the real world. The real world? Washington's composure finally showed a crack, his voice rising with controlled anger. The real world is where I grew up poor in Mount Vernon. The real world is where I learned that a man's word is his bond. The real world is where people treat each other with dignity, even when they disagree. This isn't the real world, Stephen. This is whatever alternate reality you've created, where ambushing guests passes for courage. The audience sat in uneasy silence, some visibly uncomfortable, others leaning forward in fascination. They were witnessing something unprecedented, a complete breakdown of the unspoken contract that governs television. Colbert, sensing he was losing the room entirely, lashed out with one final jab. Fine, leave, but don't expect to come crawling back when you need publicity for your next movie, and don't think this makes you some kind of hero for walking away from hard questions. Washington stopped mid-stride, turning slowly back toward him. His face carried genuine sadness mixed with steely resolve. Hero? Stephen, I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm just trying to be a man, something you might want to consider trying sometime. The insult landed with surgical precision. Colbert's face twisted through shock, rage, and humiliation before settling on something desperate. Get out. Just get out of my studio. Security! He shouted. But Washington was already walking, his dignity intact despite the chaos erupting around him. As he reached the edge of the stage, he paused and faced the audience one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know this is not what I came here for tonight. I came to share something I'm proud of with people who might enjoy it. Instead, you gotta see what happens when television forgets its basic responsibility to treat people with respect. Behind him, Colbert stood trembling at his desk, his face flushed, his hands shaking, his voice breaking with bitterness. Don't you dare lecture my audience. They came here for honest conversation, not your sanctimonious grandstanding. They came here to be entertained. Washington cut him off, his voice carrying clearly through the studio, and instead of a resolution, the audience got to watch a guest torn down for sport. I hope it was worth it, he said before walking off the stage, leaving chaos in his wake. The stunned audience sat in silence, unsure whether to clap or remain frozen. Most chose the latter. Colbert stood alone, the weight of what had just happened pressing heavily on him. His producers frantically signaled from the control booth, but he seemed paralyzed, unable to process the collapse of his own show. After what felt like an eternity, he addressed the audience, his voice stripped of confidence. Well, that was unexpected. When we come back, we'll have our musical guest. But the damage was done. During the commercial break, many audience members who had waited months for tickets and paid good money to be there began filing out, unsettled by what they had witnessed. Backstage, Washington's team was ready, phones buzzing with reporters and publicists demanding answers. His longtime agent approached with a worried expression, apologizing for the ordeal. It's not your fault, Washington replied calmly, slipping on his coat with quiet dignity. Some people show you who they really are when the cameras are rolling. Tonight, we all learned something about Stephen Colbert. Meanwhile, on set, Colbert unraveled during the commercial break, raging at his producers. How did this happen? How did we let him turn this around on me? He's the one who wouldn't answer simple questions. The executive producer, a veteran of 30 years, shook his head. Stephen, I've never seen anything like that. You completely lost control. You called him a coward and questioned his faith for 15 minutes straight. He walked out, and now this is going to be a nightmare to clean up. When the show returned, Colbert tried to salvage what remained, but his trademark charm had deserted him. His monologue fell flat. His banter with the musical guest was awkward, and the energy in the room never recovered. By the time the credits rolled, clips of the confrontation had already exploded across social media. Within hours, Denzel Walks Out was trending worldwide, with millions weighing in on the moment. The following morning brought the fallout. Ratings plunged, advertisers voiced concern, and think pieces condemned Colbert's conduct. Washington, on the other hand, carried himself with grace. When reporters pressed for comment, he simply said, I wish Mr. Colbert well, and I hope he learns from this experience. As for me, I'm focused on my work and the people who support it. Ironically, the film Washington had come to promote opened to strong box office numbers and glowing reviews, many noting the contrast between its themes of redemption and the host's failure to extend basic courtesy. Within weeks, Colbert's ratings had cratered, and whispers spread across the industry about whether his reputation could ever recover. The clash revealed something unflattering about his character that audiences found difficult to forgive. In the end, the confrontation between Denzel Washington and Stephen Colbert became more than just an explosive TV moment. It was a defining example of dignity versus outrage, principle versus performance. Washington walked away with his integrity intact, while Colbert was left to face the consequences alone on his own stage.